Thank you so much for coming. Can you hear me okay? The Carpinteria Writers Group for doing this festival. I hope we have many more of them. This lovely setting. This is my first and only novel. As our introducer said, I have written mostly scholarly works about some of the guys who are characters in my novel. And after doing that for about 20 years, an editor came to me and said, "Why don't you write about your own philosophies? Why all these men?" And they were doing a feminist series, and they said, "You should write your own." I tried to write it, and these men kept showing up, and it ended up being a fictional book, a novel, where these men appear in the novel, some of whom I knew in person. And it's also a novel that takes place at 3 points in time. I'm going to read the preface, which really takes place at the end of the book, and then tell you a little bit about the plot. And then we'll probably just be out of time, maybe have a few questions. The prelude, in the prelude, Victoria von Dietz, who is also a professor of philosophy, the main character, she studies time, and she studied the philosophy of time. And she got to the point where she thought, this is enough talk about time, let's do something about it. Why not try to go back in time before horrible things happen, so you could try and change them before they happen? So one of the things she tries to do is change the mind of Adolf Hitler before the Holocaust happens. And so the third part of the novel takes place in Nazi Germany. Victoria happened to resemble Adolf Hitler's niece, Gellie, and he actually is thought to have murdered her because he was madly in love with her and she ran away from him. But because Victoria resembles Gellie, she sort of got to be in with him in a friendly way. And therefore she thought maybe she could change his mind about the course he was taking. But it didn't quite turn out that way. And so toward the end of the novel, this is what I'm reading, which is actually in the prelude of the book. Approaching Hitler's chambers. Oh, at this time she's had twin sons, and one of them was the son of a philosopher named George Herbert Mead, who she ended up married to in the 1930s in Chicago, who was an arch philosophical enemy of Adolf Hitler, the German, Martin Heidegger, the German existentialist, who was a member of the Nazi Party, but a very glamorous figure. So she was asked by Heidegger to go to Germany, had an affair with him, and had twins, one of whom was the son of Heidegger and the other the son of Mead. It gets a little complicated, but it just had to be that way because she's trying to get past these philosophers who influenced her so much. Anyway, so she's carrying these twin boys on her hips and walking towards Hitler's chamber with a dagger in her bosom, trying to decide whether she's going to be able to murder him or not. So this is the scene. Approaching Hitler's chambers. My footsteps echo through the long marble corridor of Charlottenburg Castle as I come closer to Adolf Hitler's chambers. The dagger hidden between my breasts has grown hot from my pounding heart. My twin sons bounce on each hip, happily gurgling and smiling, oblivious to my anxiety. I kiss each on his smooth, cool forehead, fearing for each one's life, whether I succeed or fail. The boots of the guards click in syncopation behind me. When they came to escort me, they insisted I bring the babies. Der Führer's orders. I am not a violent woman. To the contrary, I've devoted much of my life to peace and justice. I was never sure whether I owed my professorship to my accomplishments or to my famous husband. That would have been George Herbert Mead, the famous Chicago philosopher she was married to. But since then, my theory of overlapping time has earned my own recognition. It was this work that brought me to Adolf's attention. I hoped to change Adolf's mind once he became intrigued with me. First because of my work, then because of my striking resemblance to the one woman he had ever truly loved, his niece, Gellie, killed by gunshot when she tried to leave his estate. I hoped to dispel his anger, to lead him to rethink his ambitions, which I have so far failed to do. Maybe today, if not with each step, I'm closer to becoming his killer. So you'll have to read the book to see what... Right now I've got them half price in there for $10. But I'll read you... Do I have a little more time? Because on the back of the book it tells you a little bit more about the plot. It starts out in 1970s in Chicago, and she's a professor at that time. Her husband, she decides in the 1970s she's tired of her ivory tower life. Her husband can't understand her infatuation for dead philosopher, German existentialist Martin Heidegger, and American pragmatist George Herbert Mead. But that's all right, because lately she can't understand why she's with her husband anyway. Especially after he beds a flirtatious co-ed. Desperate for change, Victoria jumps on a chance to travel back in time, even if it means she ends up in Nazi Germany. She finds herself married to Mead and sent on a mission to kill ruthless Nazi leader Adolf Hitler. But she can't decide whether to murder him or try and alter his course. Tackling tough questions like, are history's villains, such as Hitler, able to change for the better? And is love more about the imagined than the real? Flesh and Mind, The Time Travels of Dr. Victoria von Dietz, takes readers on a search through time for true love. So she definitely found that she was more in love with the philosophers that she studied, who were dead by the time she was teaching about them, than she was with her husbands. So then she started to study time travel and was actually able to put herself in marriage and in love with these two philosophers, who then can engage with each other and with the times. I don't know if you have any questions about this. It's or about me and why I wrote it or anything. Because I think my time is just about up.
Well, I'm sure there are questions. And you'll have a table inside. Julia.
Yeah, I just have one question. You did suggest, question about why you wrote it. Why would you say you wrote it?
Why did I write it?
What was the primary urge? I mean, we all have multiple reasons why we
Yeah.
write. Why this book?
Well, I have some of these handouts inside about it, but there's a list of 10 questions that I had stewing around for a long time that I felt writing the novel helped me address these questions. Like one of them I already mentioned, is love more about the imagined than the real? Is it possible to love a dead person you don't even know more than your real husband? If we could travel back in time, could we prevent man-made disasters such as the Holocaust? Are world-class villains amenable to change. There's also characters in here I haven't mentioned, but there's a really powerful African American lesbian gal who actually facilitates Victoria as a scholar in the 70s and a professor able to travel. And her name is, in the novel, Annabelle Carter Jackson. And she has such a deep relationship with her that she asks the question, can a heterosexual woman find that her most profound relationship is with a lesbian? Now today, this was written, well, it took me 15 years to write it. It was written, maybe it's passé now to even ask that question. Of course, the answer is yes, but maybe not. And then there's this, you can see when you read the scenes between Victoria and Adolf Hitler, she plays the piano like his niece did, and he listens to the music, and his mother is there. So a lot of this is true historically. There were a lot of women who were actually very, very much attracted to Adolf Hitler. He had this certain erotic appeal because he was the archetype of the lone wounded warrior, and this mystique and this mystery. So I was asking the question, is it possible for women to be in love with a villain, but because they have this aura? When I was a kid, I used to watch things like Al Capone movies, and he always had all these women just adoring him. And so how come women fall in love with really awful men? A lot of us do. So, and vice versa, I suppose, men and awful women. So those were some of the questions, and I couldn't deal with them writing scholarly stuff. I could only deal with them writing fiction, where I could express the emotions, not just the ideas, but the emotions, the relationships, the deeper meaning of them, only in fiction. So it was a wonderful experience, even though it took a long time. Okay, anything else? Other questions?
Please visit her table. She'll share information with you that you might be too shy to ask.